Hollywood has popularized a superhero that provides comic relief. In the middle of an intense battle, they turn to the side and crack a joke. Now, in real life, that can't happen. And the reason that can't happen is because of the way our brain operates. We have three core parts to the brain. The front part, the prefrontal cortex, that's for the thinking part of the brain, the executive function, the highest order tasks, thoughts that we have, analysis, logic, rational thinking. The back part of the brain is the limbic part of the brain, with the emotions, the feelings. And the brain stem, all the way at the back, towards the bottom of the brain, the top of the spine, is the brain stem, which we're going to call the survival brain, the part of the brain that automates, that controls the automated functions of the body, the heart to beat, the breathing. And the amygdala is something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, which is a regulator that determines what mode you should be in. Should I be in the front brain, limbic brain, or thinking brain, feeling brain, or survival brain? And when the amygdala is constantly scanning for threats, 6 times per second, and when it senses a threat, it shifts your brain into survival mode. And in survival brain, your heart starts beating differently, you start breathing differently, and you can't be irrational. You can't be cracking jokes in that moment. If you want to feel what this is like, hold your breath as long as you possibly can, and then count down 10 seconds. And during that 10 seconds, try to think of the solution to a math problem. Try to come up with a feeling. You won't be able to articulate any thought or any feeling except breathe, breathe, breathe. Your brain will be screaming at you to survive. People who are victims of trauma, whether it's an intense trauma or moderate trauma, what happens with trauma means, the definition of trauma is an emotional overload. Something that the emotional, that you can't handle, but the brain can't handle, the person can't handle. And it perceives a threat and shifts into survival mode just to protect itself. That was a threat. That was something that did something to me, and it was an instance of being bullied. It was something more intense, and therefore I shift a little bit into survival brain to protect myself. And what happens when a person is in survival brain, and sometimes if it's is that they keep themselves protected and they keep everyone else away until they're sure they're not a threat. And if it's a more intense trauma, what could happen is that the person could get stuck in survival mode. And the key characteristic trait of someone who is stuck in survival brain, someone who went through trauma, is aloneness. Because they keep everyone else away because they might be a threat. Since that is the characteristic of someone who went through trauma, of someone who's in survival brain, the way to bring them out of that is to help them feel not alone, to help them feel connected, to try and say, hey, I'm with you, acknowledge it, I understand it, I empathize with it. And there's a technique called mirroring. And all of this is to help them feel not alone, and then they can ease out of that into the limbic, into the emotional part of the brain, and express their feelings and feel comfortable doing that. And then eventually they can go back up to executive function, to the highest order, highest functioning capacity. I heard this explanation from an expert in the field last week at the conference that I was at. And it occurred to me, siyata d'shmaya, that this tracks history of Klal Yisrael, history of Moshe Rabbeinu. We as a people were traumatized. Right at the beginning of our existence, we were a nation of slaves. We were abused, persecuted, tortured, subjugated for centuries. And we come out of Mitzrayim, we're a traumatized people. We're in survival mode. We're in survival brain. We're timid. We're alone. And it takes a long time for Hashem's warm embrace to get us out of that shell, get us into a place where we could be restored. And not until the end, end of Sefer Devarim does Hashem say, Moshe Rabbeinu says, V'lo nasan Hashem, and Hashem didn't give you leiv lodas ve'inayim liros v'aznayim l'shmei, a heart to understand, and eyes to see and ears to hear until now. Now you have you're back in that executive function after 40 years. 40 is a unit of recreation. It's the unit of Yetzira Savlata, the formation of the fetus, and the 40 years of being ensconced in the Ananei HaKavod, in the clouds of glory, and the warm hug of Hashem, in that limbic state, was able to bring us out into the ability to have that executive function. And in Devarim, that's where we get the full Torah, all the details, chapter and verse, in the most detailed form. And think of Moshe Rabbeinu. What about his childhood? What a traumatic childhood that was. He starts out, he's being hidden, he's thrown into the river. One person picks him up, they trade him for another person. Then he grows up in the king's palace. He goes through all kinds of traumatic experiences there. He's watching his brethren being tortured. What side is he on? And so he goes out like a timid, traumatized person would, to be a shepherd alone, keeping everyone at bay. And Hashem comes to him and says, Moshe, you're the guy. You're the one who's going to be the one to transform Klal Yisrael, restore them from being a traumatized nation of slaves to a nation of princes. And Moshe says, me? You got the wrong person. I don't want to talk to anyone. I just want to stay here quietly. Lo yesh dvarim anoichi. I'm not a man of words. Kavad peh ukevad lashon anoichi. My mouth is heavy. My tongue is heavy. I'm not comfortable talking in public. I don't do that. And Hashem says, Anoichi eye impicha. I will be with you. I will be with your mouth. You're not alone. You're not alone. I'm with you. And bit by bit, Moshe is able to be coaxed out of that cocoon of insularity. And Moshe goes and spends 40 days and 40 nights for an individual. What the Klal Yisrael had to spend in years, he spent in days. 40 days and 40 nights with the Shekhinah, connected to the source of everything, connected with infinite consciousness. And after that, he comes down, he's a changed man. He doesn't feel aloneness. He's never alone. He feels so plugged in to the core, to the center of everything. And his face is glowing. And through that connection, Moshe is able to undergo a transformation. As the Medrash remarks, from lo ish devarim anoichi, where he started out as a traumatized, timid, shy, alone, said lo ish devarim anoichi, he said, I'm not a person with words, all the way to Eile hadvarim asher diber Moshe, to the whole Sefer Devarim being what Moshe spoke. Not once in this book, Rishonim point out, does it say, Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe lemar. The most common pasuk in the Torah that Hashem spoke to Moshe, tell the Bnei Yisrael, that's not what happens in Eile HaDevarim. In the whole Sefer, the whole book of Devarim, it is the words, these are the words that Moshe spoke. That's why it's so important for each of us with our own children to make sure that we are giving them that connection. Because people are constantly going through one type of trauma, another type of trauma, and they can feel alone. And if we give them that embrace, that acknowledgement, that connection, we build a foundation for them to achieve their highest potential. This past week, I had a great experience, Baruch Hashem, with my two oldest children. With my wife's encouragement, we went on a glamping trip. To look that up. It's basically camping without roughing it. And it was me and the two oldest ones, and it was so precious, so priceless, and I couldn't articulate what it was until after. And it was that the kids could be themselves with me, their own presence. The kid, for your children to be able to be their true self with you around, that kind of comfort, that kind of connection is priceless. And don't worry about the discipline. Discipline's going to come. They'll follow your lead. They'll follow your guidance if you have that real foundation of connection. With this understanding, we have a deeper appreciation of the Churban. After a painstaking process of rebuilding Klal Yisrael, the traumatized people, helping them feel safe, helping them feel connected, finally getting back to executive function, having that for a long time. And then the Churban, which is the father saying, get out of my house. Traumatized over again. And we had this year, some people personally, all of us collectively, tremendous trauma for as a people. Torture, murder, violence, humiliation, horrors, hatred, fear, anti-Semitism. And we have this feeling of being alone. That is the characteristic of Galus. Eicha Yashva Badad. How was the city? Alone. It's alone. Traumatized again. No one there to comfort us. But that's why on Shabbos we read the Haftarah of Chazon. Shabbos is not a time for Espedim. We do it in the Sad. We learn it in the Sad to Nevecha. But it's Chazon. Chazon means the vision. What's the vision? Says the Berditchever. The vision is that we can see, even in the darkest moments, we can see the path out of the darkness. Like Rabbi Akiva, when he saw the destruction, he was able to see the seed, the kernel of the Geula. We've been here before. We've been traumatized before. We've had these inner struggles, and we all have these struggles that we're each dealing with. But we know that underneath all of that, we are a chelek elokam imal. We are a piece of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are a part of the infinite consciousness of reality, and we are not alone. And we have to take that first step. We have to take that first step to put that connection into our lives, and the way we can most access it is through Torah, because Torah is the manifestation of Hashem on earth. And so let's take upon ourselves, we're going to start a night Seder, Be'ez Hashem, starting in Elul, and all the other opportunities to connect. And we take the first step to connect to Hashem. Hashem will reciprocate and bring us under that embrace. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're pining for in this, as we head towards Tisha B'Av, is for Hashem to once again, Hashivenu Hashem Elecha v'Nashuva, to take us under His embrace, and that will bring us to restore us to our glory, to our fullest potential, with the coming of Mashiach. Amen.